Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom. House of Chief Elazar. Shabbat Shalom. Teachers. Chief Shammah. Chief Mikael. Princess Ima. And rest of my brothers. House of Chief Elazar. Family. The family. Shabbat Shalom. Baruch Shemo. All right, let's get started. Without further ado. We're going to rise, give praises. Giving all honor and praise to the Most High God, who sitteth in the seat of judgment, whose throne is God of gods, King of kings, the high and lofty one, who inhabits eternity, who has no counselor and none to consort with him. He who has reigned from the beginning, before any creature was formed, or any green shoot shot forth, before the foundations of the earth were laid, before the legions of angels first assembled. Yea, he who possessed wisdom ere the waters were parted asunder, or the winds of the firmament ever blew. He alone, the dreaded one, did reign, still reigns, and shall reign over all things forever. From everlasting to everlasting, El Shaddai, the Almighty God, the creator of all life, who made man in his own image, to whom he gave a heart of flesh, and has imparted him with the five operations of Elohim, eyes to see, ears to hear, smell, and taste, that he might enjoy the pleasures of eating and drinking, whereby he may obtain strength and healing from the foods and medicines of the earth that he made for him. And feeling also, both to the touch and in the inward parts, to know what was in his heart, whether he would serve Ha Elohim, his maker, or no. And besides these, he endowed him with good sense and reason, and speech to interpret the things that are seen and heard, that he might comprehend and articulate his thoughts, becoming fully aware, possessing the power to make sound decisions. And in his abounding loving kindness, he granted him understanding, yea, and knowledge also, that he might have withal to pursue the things that are pleasing to the Lord and depart from evil. He to whom all honor, worship, and praise is due, the omnipotent God, the God of the Hebrews, who made the sea and the dry land, the God of Abraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov, the God of Israel, the true and living God, the author of love, time, life, and sound, who spake and it was created, for all things are done at the words of his mouth, who breathed life, the one spirit, into our first father Adam, from whom we all are come to the world, which he made for the serving, nurturing, and nourishment of man, his most precious creation, to whom he gave his most righteous law, for righteousness belonging to him alone, who is just in all things, who keep his covenant and mercy with them that love him, and keep his commandments to 1,000 generations, even to the seed of his beloved friend Abraham, even to us, the children of Israel, Ben Isaac and Maccabees, sons of the ancient Maccabees. For he is our God, the ancient of days, for before the day was, is he. The God of the spirits of all flesh, El Quanah, the jealous God, El Rakum, the merciful God, El Rapah, the God of healing, the one and only true healer, the God of truth, Hagadol, the great, Hagibor, the mighty, with Hanorah, and the terrible. Elohim Zebaoth, the Lord of hosts is his name. He is the King of glory. Blessed be the glorious name of his kingdom forever and ever. For he is good, for his mercy endureth forever. Giving due respect to the chief men, princes, dignitaries, officers, mothers in Israel, brothers and sisters, I stand before you this day, Prince Zakaryah, a title bestowed upon me by the order of Chiefs Elazar, Ben Lewi, Ben Dodo, aka Matitya, father of the house of the Maccabees, my teacher and leader, in whose honor I speak and continue the legacy of his name, works, and teachings, in the name of our God and the holy law given us at the mouth of his prophet Moshe, reinstituted by and in accordance with the protocol set forth by Hanasi Yaakov, head knock of all the Hebrews, teacher, leader, and founder of Ben Isaacin, the first Hebrew Israelite congregation in the United States of America, whither we have been exiled because of our sins and the sins of our fathers, whom our God commissioned to bring his people together, to the intent that he might open our eyes and give us ears to hear and a heart to perceive, as it is at this day, so that we may keep his commandments, return to him, and repair the breach. I bid you in the ancient tongue of our fathers, Shabbat Shalom Lechem.
Shabbat Shalom Lakah.
You may be seated. You do that off camera, buddy. Excuse me. Please remain standing. Thank you, Malik. As we recite the Constitution of Israel in Hebrew from Exodus chapter 20. Please repeat after me. Vayidaber Elohim
וידבר אלוהים
et kal hadebarim
את כל התדברים.
ha'aleh lemor
העלה לאמור,
anoki el shaddai Eloheka
אנוכי אשר אלוהיך,
asher hotzetika
אשר הוצאתיך
me'eretz Mitzrayim
מארץ מצרים,
מבית עבדים
מבית עברים.
לא יהיה לך
לא יהיה לך
אלוהים האחרים
אלוהים אחרים
על פניי.
על פניי.
לא תעשה לך פסל
לא תעשה לך פסל.
וקל תמונה
וכל תמונה
אשר בשמיים ממעל
אשר בשמיים ממעל,
ואשר בארץ מתחת
ואשר בארץ מתחת,
ואשר במים מתחת לארץ.
ואשר במים מתחת לארץ.
לא תשתחווה להם
לא תשתחווה להם
ולא תעבדם
ולא תעבדם,
כי אנוכי אל שדי אלוהיך
כי אנוכי אשר אלוהיך
אל כהנה
אל כהנה
פוקר ההון
וכהרעון,
אבות על בנים
אבות הבנים
על שילשים
על שילשים
ועל ריבעים
ועל ריבעים
לשונאי
לשונאי,
ועושה חסד
ועושה חסד
לאלפים לאוהבי
ואלפים לא הבית,
ולשומרי מצוותיי.
ולשומרי מצוותיי.
לא תישא את שם
לא תישא את שם
אל שדי אלוהיך
אל שדי אלוהיך
לשווא
לשווא,
כי לא ינקה אל שדי
כי לא ינקה אל שדי
את אשר יישא
את אשר יישא
את שמו לשווא.
את שמו לשווא.
זכור את יום השבת
זכור את יום השבת
לקודשו
לקודשו,
6 ימים תעבוד
6 ימים תעבוד,
ועשית כל מלאכתך
ועשית כל מלאכתך.
ויום השביעי
ביום השביעי
שבת לאל שדי אלוהיך
השבת לאל שדי אלוהיך.
לא תעשה כל מלאכה
לא תעשה כל מלאכה
אתה
אתה
ובנך
ובנך
וביתך
וביתך
עבדך
עבדך
ועמתך
ועמתך
ובהמתך
ובהמתך
וגרך אשר בשעריך
וגרך אשר בשעריך.
כי 6 ימים עשה אל שדי
כי 6 ימים עשה אל שדי
את השמיים
את השמיים
ואת הארץ
ואת הארץ
את הים
את הים
ואת כל אשר בם
ואת כל אשר בם.
וינק ביום השביעי
וינק ביום השביעי,
על כן ברק אל שדי
על כן ברק אל שדי
את יום השבת
את יום השבת
ויקודשהו.
ויקודשהו.
כבד את אביך
כבד את אביך
ואת אמך
ואת אמך
למען יאריכון ימיך
למען יאריכון ימיך
על האדם
על האדם
אשר אל שדי אלוהיך
אשר אל שדי אלוהיך
נותן לך.
נותן לך.
לא תרזח
לא תרזח
לא תנאף
לא תנאף
לא תגנוב
לא תגנוב
לא תענה
לא תענה
ברעך עד שקר
ברעך עד שקר
לא תחמוד
לא תחמוד
בית רעך
בית רעך
לא תחמוד
לא תחמוד
אשת רעך
אשת רעך
ועבדו
ועבדו
ואמתו
ואמתו
ושורו
ושורו
וחמורו
וכמורו
וכל אשר לרעך.
כל אשר לרעך.
Shavuot. And all the people perceived the thunderings and the lightnings and the voice of the horn and the mountain smoking. And when the people saw it, they removed and stood afar off. And they said unto Moses, speak thou with us, and we will hear. But let not God speak with us, lest we die. And Moses said unto the people, fear not, for God has come to prove you, and that his fear may be before your faces, that you transgress not. And the people stood afar off, but Moses drew near unto the thick darkness where God was. And the Lord said unto Moses, thus thou shalt say unto the children of Israel, ye have seen that I have talked to you from heaven. You shall not make with me gods of silver, neither shall you make unto you gods of gold. An altar of earth thou shalt make unto me, and shalt sacrifice thereon thy burnt offerings and thy peace offerings, thy sheep and thine oxen. In all places where I record my name, I will come unto thee, and I will bless thee. And if thou wilt make me an altar of stone, thou shalt not build it of hewn stone. For if thou lift up thy tool upon it, thou hast polluted it. Neither shalt thou go up by steps unto mine altar, that thy nakedness be not discovered thereon. Baruch Shemo. Leave it. All right. Torah. Who said you don't speak Hebrew? Huh? Y'all was just speaking Hebrew. Y'all was just reciting the 10 commandments in Hebrew. Be'ibrit. Huh? It's one of the most powerful words ever spoken. Came directly from the mouth of God to the children of Israel. The first and last and only time in history that God spake to an entire nation of people all at once. And they all heard his voice. That's what we just recited. So I want to, before we get into today's lesson, and I'm sure you saw the title or you see the title, the Dietary Laws of the Torah. And before we get into this, I want to ask that we all, what have you heard me ask before, that we all try to think in Hebrew, right? And I know it's difficult because we don't speak Hebrew, or Hebrew is not our first language or our native tongue. But when we find out what words mean, because the book teaches us what words mean, we learn what words mean from the way that God taught us in the Hebrew language. And this is why you hear us say the book teaches us what words mean, because we find out what this word means in Hebrew. Doesn't always say the same thing in English, but then we learn the true meaning of that word, how God used the word, and the breakdowns and the examples that he gives in the Torah and in the rest of the Tanakh, as the writers that wrote, who were chosen by God, to give us a full understanding of what that word means to God, who is the creator of all language, and all languages came from Hebrew. And if we don't understand that, to give a clearer picture, before the building of the Tower of Babel, the whole world spoke Hebrew. God spoke Hebrew in creation, and it's throughout the book that we can see, throughout the Torah especially, and specifically in Genesis, during creation, God gave names to certain things that coincided or corresponds with the order of life that he set up. You know, Adam is not a coincidence that he was called Adam and was created after the earth was created, which he was made from, and that same earth is called Adamah, towards man, right? Or the feminine form of man, right? Because she has feminine attributes according to Hebrew, according to the logic of the language. So as we start to learn what words mean in Hebrew, and that's just one example. We can give many, but I'll be here for the rest of the teachings just on that topic alone. So, and you know I'm good for it. So before we do that, let's try to understand the words that we're learning in Hebrew. And instead of bouncing them off of what we think we already know and what we were taught in school, or the indoctrinations of our youth, the negationistic teachings of our youth, let us come with an empty cup, an empty bowl, ready to be filled with this knowledge, so that we can get a full understanding of what these words mean and how God used these words in breaking down the teachings of the law to us, so that we could learn the things that are pleasing to him and the things that are not pleasing to him, the things that he calls acceptable, the things that are not acceptable, the things that he refers to as good, and the things that he refers to as evil, the things that he refers to as clean, in distinction from what he refers to as unclean, the holy from the profane, and so on and so forth. So let's keep all of this in mind as we read through this, because, or as we explore and expound through these teachings, because we are going to come across concepts that seem strange, because we are not familiar. They are not familiar to the teachings that we were brought up with, or the modern day society paradigms, the way of thinking, right? So let's keep all of that in mind. And without further ado, let's dive directly into Leviticus chapter 11. Tamei, scribe, when you get it, from the top.
And the Lord spake unto Moses and Aaron, saying unto them, Speak unto the children of Israel, saying, These are the beasts which ye shall eat among all the beasts that are on the earth. Whatsoever parteth
let's hold it right there. Let's break that. Let's get that in Hebrew so we can understand what we're being taught. Dabru el bnei Israel, speak unto the children of Israel, lemor, saying, Zot hachaya asher toklu. Now, the difference between hakaya and behema, or the words that is used like bakwar, that is used for cattle, is that the word chaya means a living creature, right? So speaking to the children of Israel, saying, these are the living creatures which ye shall eat among all the beasts, habehema, asher al haaretz. Because in this chapter, we're not only going to be talking about beasts. So among the beasts, there's other creatures that God is going to disclose to us in this chapter that he is revealing to us that are clean to eat. All right. And it's one thing to understand what is clean from unclean, but I want us to be specific to the wording in these verses so that we get a full understanding of what God is teaching us, right? Because these are among all the beasts on the earth, among the behema, but we're talking about chaya, the living things. Okay, Tamshi, verse 3.
Whatsoever parteth the hoof and is cloven-footed and cheweth the cud among the beasts, that shall ye eat. Nevertheless, these shall ye not eat of them that chew the cud, or of them that divide the hoof, as the camel, because he cheweth the cud, but divideth not the hoof, he is unclean unto you.
All right, so I took some notes as usual because we must understand what these words mean. And before we go into the notes, let's get a breakdown in Hebrew of verse 3. Kol mafreset parsa, of all that, okay, paras means to divide, but a parsa is a hoof, right? And it makes sense when we break down according to the logic of the language, the meaning of these words, because it's dividing from where the animal has flesh to this keratin, this hoof that is made out of keratin, the same thing that is found in our hair and nails, right? So his foot is made out of an entire piece of keratin, among other minerals, but this is the dividing of when his flesh stops and the hoof begins. So it's described as the dividing of the hoof, and the word hoof comes from the word to divide, paras, and the hoof is parsa. So mafreset parsa means all that divide the hoof. Where shosaat shesa, shosaat is the cleaving, shesa is the cleft, perasot of the hoofs, right? So it translates to all that cleaving the cleft of the hoof, which means the hoof has a cleft, it has a part in the middle, right? It's parted. That's why in English it says that parted the hoof, right? I'm just giving you the Hebrew translation, right? And cheweth the cud, ma'alat gerah, that cheweth the cud. Now, a beast that chews the cud has more than one stomach. I think the first two characteristics we understand, right? For chewing the cud, which until we started reading the law was a phrase that was new to us, and that means an animal, unless you study some type of zoology or something. But other than that, chewing the cud means an animal that has more than one stomach. Animals that have more than one stomach are of the ruminant family, or the ruminatia. These are the classified scientific terms. Again, I'm just referencing these, but we're going to go by what the book says and what the book calls these specific animals, which in this case, they're categorized amongst the behema. Ba behema or ta toklu. Among the beasts, those tokelu, ye shall eat. So I want to point out something here. It doesn't say these are clean. It's telling us these are that ye shall eat. Not because they're not clean, but we can eat them. They are clean and we can eat them, but it doesn't specify to make a point that they're clean, because the point of this chapter is to let us know which animals or chaya, living things, creatures among the beasts that we can eat. And that's what the chapter is about. Okay. Nevertheless, these of them you shall not eat, that only chew the cud. Ak et ze lo toklu mimale hagira mimafrise haparsa, which also divide the hoof, et hagamal, right? Or chew the cud, or only divide the hoof, only part the hoof, right? Et hagamal, the camel, et ki ma'ala gira, because he chews the cud, but he does not part the hoof, right? They have toes, right? And even though it's a cleft, it's a toe, right? And part of the hoof, he is unclean unto you, right? Okay, Tamshi, verse 5.
And the coney because he cheweth the cud, but divideth not the hoof, he is unclean unto you. And the hare, because he cheweth the cud, but divideth not the hoof, he is unclean unto you.
Now, some translations translate the word for coney, hashafan, as a badger, a rock badger. And then the next verse, the hare, ha'arnebet, as a rabbit or a hare. Those are the same family. The coney is also a type of rabbit. So it's unclear, and we may never get to the bottom of the translation of certain of the names of these beasts or birds when looking up the names of them, because there's too many conflicting answers in the definitions in the dictionaries. And since we don't have other parts of the book to compare where this animal is mentioned and give us a description of that animal to use the book to find out what this word means, like we do with other words, sometimes we just got to leave it up in the air. But the important thing to know is that if it does not have a hoof that has a cleft in it and it chews the cud, then we cannot eat it if it doesn't have those three characteristics. So I want to refer to these notes for a second so that to explain certain things, because there are modern systems in place that may create confusion. There are people that lean on the teachings of Judaism to try to understand certain parts of the Torah, which we do not condone. Torah is a teacher in itself and needs no assistance. The truth needs no defense or help. So if we stick to what the Torah says, we'll be just fine without adding on or taking away. So that's what we're going to do in this study. We will define which beasts, fish, and fowl are clean to eat, permissible under Torah law, adhering strictly to Moses, using Hebrew for clarity and context, the conditions and criteria for eating clean creatures, and the difference between clean and kosher. Okay, so notice how these verses state which ye shall eat, that you shall eat, but not these are clean to you, because these laws teach us that this is what is acceptable to eat, by coinciding with the order of life that God established at creation in the beginning. So first, we must understand the Hebrew words used to describe what is clean and unclean, since these are going to be the topics throughout this chapter. So, and they don't only refer to beasts. So we'll make that clear. In the Torah, the primary categories for clean and unclean are Tahor and Tamei, right? Tahor is clean, Tamei is unclean. Kosher is a technical term for the entire Jewish dietary system, later established by the rabbinical concept of halakha, which means the way to walk. There's a book that they have that rabbis go by from some medieval rabbis that have put this together, and it continues to get amended, just like the Talmud, right? And it has a much broader concept of what kosher means, right? So Tahor is clean or pure, and it is a Torah classification of acceptable status before God applied to animals, people, or the status of a person, the state of a person, or places or objects, right? Unclean, tameh, means unclean or impure. It is spiritually opposite to the priestly procedure, or opposite to the acceptable classification status before God. Status of what? animal, a person, a place, or an object, right? Kasher or kosher, it means fit, suitable, or proper. It is a Hebrew word. The word occurs in the Tanakh in the sense of proper or suitable, but the Torah does not use it in reference to the dietary laws. Neither is it mentioned anywhere in the Torah. And we'll get into where it is used in the book and how it is used a little bit later. The distinction existed, the clean, of what was clean from unclean as far as beasts existed before Sinai. Noah was instructed, of every clean beast you shall take to you by sevens, and of beasts that are not clean by two. After the flood, Noah built an altar to the Most High and took every clean beast and of every clean fowl and offered burnt offerings, which means the knowledge of what was clean from unclean among the beasts and the fowl was passed down to Noah, likely from Adam, passed down to Seth, right, to Enosh, to Cainan, to Mahalalel, to Yared, to Enoch, to Methuselah, to Lamech, to Noah, right? Or since some of them were still alive in their times, Adam could have likely passed it down to Methuselah since he was still alive in the time of Methuselah, right? Methuselah would have then passed it to Noah, right? So unlike kosher, tahor and tamei are not rabbinic inventions. It was embedded in the Torah narrative before the Mosaic covenant. Leviticus gives us the anatomical criteria of what a clean beast must have, which is, we just went over to divide the hoof. The hoof must have a cleft and the animal must chew the cud, having more than one stomach. Okay, Tamshi.
And the swine, though he divided the hoof and be cloven-footed, yet he cheweth not the cud, he is unclean to you. Right. So he chews the cud.
He chews not the cud. He has a hoof and it is cloven foot, but the swine is unclean. He doesn't chew the cud. And a pig will eat anything, right? And if you notice some commonality between all of the unclean beasts, they eat filth. All of the animals that God commanded that we could eat vegetation only. Now, that's not to say that that is a sign to show that the animal's unclean, because gorillas eat vegetation only, right? Which, since we're on the topic, we're going to debunk a myth that you need to eat meat to get protein. How is it that the animals that have the largest muscles amongst the animal kingdom do not eat meat to build that muscle mass, but yet they eat vegetation? And yet, here we are in a society that teaches us you must eat meat to get protein, and we're thinking that, oh, that must be true. Not even taking in consideration that elephants, gorillas, the largest animals in the animal kingdom, do not eat meat, right? So just something to think about. If you're one of these people that says we gotta eat meat because how else am I gonna get my protein? Just to let you know that on from vegetation, you can get a complete protein, because they like to argue that beans are not a complete protein and it doesn't equivocate to the protein that you're getting from meat. But I can tell you that if you eat lentils together with brown rice, you will get a complete protein, which is the same exact kind of protein that you're going to get from the muscles of flesh of an animal. Okay, so on a physiological or biological scale, it is the same components. Okay, so just something to think about. All right, you don't need meat to get protein. By the way, you don't even need protein for building muscle mass. You just need the right combination of amino acids. A protein is a combination of amino acids that are bound together, and your body first has to break them apart in order for you to process those amino acids and send it to your muscles to build that muscle mass. So if you want to get technical, you just need certain combinations of amino acids. You don't even need protein to build muscle. But these are misconceptions because we are not taught. I learned these things from my teacher and in my own studies thereafter, but he's the one that broke that down to me first, right? Now you hear all this stuff online of people talking about it. He was teaching me this over 20 years ago, right? Okay. And for those to clarify, those that don't know, my teacher I'm referring to is Chief of Chief Elazar Ben Lewi. Right? Okay. So I want to go, since we're on the topic of the clean beast that chewed the cud, and last week, you know, we came to a conclusion that needed to be clarified, that yes, there are beasts that we are not familiar with being edible that are clean in reference to the characteristics that are required by the Torah, by God, that make them clean, and giraffe was amongst them. So today I brought a list of clean beasts that part the hoof, have a cleft in the hoof, and chew the cud. And we have cattle and oxen, which is the bovine family, including cows, ox, bulls, and there are different kinds of cows, many different types of cows, right? And which also we're going to learn to understand that the types and the families and the classifications and the species of certain things do not mean the same thing according to Torah. So we have to stick to what the Torah says and don't bring science into it to say, well, this is of the same species, or is of the same type, or is the same class. That's not what Torah teaches us. This is what science teaches us. We have to separate the two and come again as an empty vessel and let the Torah fill us with knowledge. Among this list is sheep, goats, right? These are all the first three that we read about are animals that are used in offerings. Keep that in mind, right? Because we're going to learn something else about the offerings, how these certain parts of the animals of offerings are relevant to us being able to understand the law. And okay, now in the wild, we have the Cervidae family, which is consisting of deer, elk, and moose. Yes, they are all clean to eat. Antelope and gazelle that we read about in Deuteronomy chapter 14. Bison and buffalo. Yes, they are clean. Giraffes, they are clean. The pronghorn, look it up. It's a funny looking beast, but it has a hoof that has a cleft and it chews the cud. A wildebeest. The chevrotain, which is the mouse deer. They have fangs, real skinny little fangs, right? And they're very small. They're the smallest ruminant that has a hoof with a cleft. Again, that's called the chevrotain. The okapi. Okapi is, I wish I could show some pictures, but for those of you that have your phones in hand, which most of us do at all times, or in your pocket, you can look at these words, OKAPIS, and Google it and find some pictures of what the okapi is, or okapis are. And they have, although they have zebra stripes on the hind legs and the bottoms of their front two legs, they are not hybrid animals. They are just animals that God created, and they adapted certain characteristics according to their environments, right? So it is a relative of the giraffe, but that's not what makes it clean. Again, the characteristics that it has makes it a clean animal. It's native to the Congo in Africa. That's where you'll find them. What other animals? The Saiga antelope looks crazy. The snout looks like Mr. Snuffleupagus without the long hanging snout. And he's got some horns like an antelope that are coiled, and it looks strange. The snout kind of looks like a camel, but these are clean. They have hoofs with a cleft and chews the cud. You know, and you find them in different regions across the earth. They're native to the steppes of Central Asia. Remember, we went over a few weeks ago that a steppe is a flat grassland, right, without trees, right? So Central Asia, you know, that's, those of you who don't know, that's not necessarily China or Mongolia. This is further east, further west. So we're talking about India and the countries above India. Bongos, another animal, has stripes, looks like an antelope, but is short and fat, and they're native to forest-dwelling antelopes that live in Africa, right, in the forests of Africa. So check it out. Look them up if you want to find out there are other animals that are clean to eat that we are unfamiliar with. They're not common. Our fathers didn't eat them because they are not indigenous to the area of what we read about in the book as the land of Canaan, the land of Israel. And that's why we don't, it sounds strange to us. But once they have all of the characteristics that we read about in Leviticus 11 that makes it a clean beast to eat, then there's no reason why we shouldn't accept that. There's no reason why we should argue that, right? It doesn't mean, oh, I wouldn't need it. Well, I mean, I would. I'm not going to go looking to buy it. But if I happen to be in a place where that's the only thing for me to eat, and we got to hunt and catch me an okapi, then so be it. You know, I'm a resort to plant and vegetation first. But I'm just saying, it should be nothing inside of the boundaries of the law that we should look at it saying, nah, I wouldn't do that. I wouldn't eat that. You know, I never thought I'd eat a cricket either. But I have, because it's clean. There's nothing wrong with it. Okay? Leviticus 11.
Of their flesh shall ye not eat, and their carcass shall ye not touch. They are unclean to. These shall ye eat of all that are in the waters.
So of the flesh of the pig shall ye not touch. That's the swine, the pig. And of his flesh you shall not eat, and their carcass shall you not touch. Another thing I heard Chief Shama breaking down today of how our teacher, Chief Elazar, used to put on gloves before he even touched a mingled material. He would do the same thing with leathers, because we found out that they're making leather out of pig skin. And, you know, and how I found that out is I brought home a pair of shoes one day, and in the inside of it, and underneath the tongue, not on the outside, it was regular leather, but the inside underneath the tongue was a softer leather, and it had like pores that are in patterns of 3, 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. And you look, so I'm telling you how you could recognize what pigskin looks like. And then we looked it up and come to find out that was pigskin, right? Needless to say, I got rid of the shoes. But that's how we learned what pigskin looks like. And so after that, Chief is like, well, all right, we're going to be careful what I touch from now on. And we got to be mindful of that when you're buying leather, you look closely and make sure you don't see those pores in patterns of 3 scattered around the shoe. I mean, around the leather, right? So something to keep in mind. They're doing it with jackets. They're doing it with belts, right? Wallets. So all of that is something to keep in mind when we out there shopping for goods. Okay. Also want to clarify something. Footballs are not made out of pigskin. Neither are basketballs. The first football was made out of pigskin, and when they started the NFL, by that time they already started making it out of leather because it was more durable, cowhide because it was more durable. So pigskin footballs haven't existed for a long time now. So that's not something you need to be wary of. Okay, I can't play catch with a football because it's pigskin. That's not true. You need to look it up. We need to do our research. We can't take things for face value. We're talking about the way of life that we live here. We can't just go by hearsay and what people say. We need to go and check it out and, you know, back it up with facts, right? And so this is where history comes in. I'm not talking about ancient history, but modern history, where you start to look things up to find out how things originated. I heard my brother Chief Mikhail talking about that today, how certain customs came about, where it came from, right? And so is that something? Is that our favorite pastime? No, that's an American all-time American favorite pastime, football, right? And that's not ours. This is one of the customs of America. But just to clarify that, you know, if you you don't have to watch the NFL, you don't have to put your kids in Little League or in Pop Warner football. But if you playing catch with your son at the park with a football, you're not touching pigskin, all right? Okay, so just to clarify a few things, and I say this every time I'm bringing information that might be different to something you might have heard before. If anybody challenges any of the information that is being brought in teachings, please bring it to me, and also be ready to cite your sources and show it. And things that pertain to law, make sure that you can show it in the book using the Torah. And if not, we're not going by commentary or what we think or interpretations. If it doesn't match up and we can't use verses in the book to back it up or actual substantial historical evidence, then it's garbage. And we can't go by garbage. We got to go by facts. All right. So, Tamshi, go ahead, verse 9.
These shall ye eat of all that are in the waters, whatsoever hath fins and scales in the waters, in the seas and in the rivers. Then,
Yeah, we don't go by that. My brother Abraham said, trust me, bro. That's the source. No, don't trust me. I'm going to tell you like my teacher told me. Don't take my word for it. Look it up for yourself. And that way, you don't have people running around talking about, well, Chief said, you know, don't throw me under the bus. Prince Zakaryah said, no. Don't say what I said. Go check it out, look it up for yourself, and then cite your source of where you found the information. Also, I'm going to say this again. Nobody has took me up on this offer yet, but I am compiling a Google Docs folder that is full of other folders. And in these folders, there are prayers. They are the copies of the Zikron that go in the frontlet, the bracelet, the mezuzot, the doorpost, right? And history concerning the holidays. They're not complete. I'm in the process of compiling all of this information and putting together in folders in a Google Doc on Google Drive. That way you don't have to download anything and clog up your phone or your laptop or your computer and use up all the memory. It stays on the internet, in the cloud, however you want to call it. But all of this information that you've been hearing about the calendars, the days of the weeks, the seasonal times, the culture of the ancient culture of the Hebrews, the clean and unclean, the distinctions between Torah and kosher, laws, all of this information, including these beasts, and there will be pictures there for you to see also. It's all going to exist in a living digital space online within a Google Docs folder. If anybody wants access to it, all you have to do is share with me your email. I keep saying this, and it's like you can take the ass to the river, but you can't make them drink. If you don't want it, hey, fine. If you're cool just listening and gathering information that way, fine. Me, personally, I like to have notes, and I like to be able to see the information. I like to be able to review it on my own time. I like to be able to say, hey, this is where it came from. This is where I got it from. This is according to National Geographic, also backs up what the book says. There's evidence and scientific findings that backs up what we read in Genesis chapter 1. And, this is where we're all bringing evidence to support the law, using the law as a foundation of truth for all information, for all knowledge, and then bringing evidence that supports the law outside of the law to prove to other people that don't believe it or that may have been taught something different and have a misconstrued idea of what this law says or what it means. The beginning of a day, what Ereb is, what evening is. All of these things, people running around like chickens without a head, just believing somebody that said something that has a YouTube channel, and that don't necessarily classify a good teacher, right? So my teacher taught me that a good teacher will teach you something you never heard before, right? A great teacher will not only teach you something you never heard before, but will tailor the message in a way that inspires you to be better. And in order to do that, that teacher is going to come with sources. He's not just going to tell you something and you're going to be like, wow, I never heard that before. No, he's going to show you where he learned it from, show you how it matches up with the book, understanding that he is not the one that found the knowledge, understanding that The knowledge and the wisdom that we learn from the book comes from God, and God must open our eyes to show us these things only because we have a made-up mind to submit to the words of the Torah and to do them and apply them, and then you become able to understand, which is to depart from evil, and then wisdom becomes your guide, and then you start to look things up and use sources to support what you're reading in the Torah when you're explaining them to other people, so that you don't lead somebody astray by accidentally or unintentionally slipping in your own interpretation or what you've been indoctrinated to think when you're explaining the Torah. And that's when you're going to say to yourself, I need to look this up in Hebrew. I need to learn Hebrew. I need to find out what God is really saying here. Because if we're not going to study that way, we're not even scratching the surface. So with that said, anybody want access to this information? All you got to do is drop your email. I will add you to the Google Docs folder. You can see everything on your own. There will be numbers next to information that are links, hyperlinks. You can click on them and see the sources that I've cited for all of this information. See where I got it from. I didn't just use Google or ChatGPT, because even when you find something on Google and ChatGPT, you got to understand that it's just like a huge brain that's just somebody poured all the information from the internet inside of, and that is filled with good and bad information, truth and lies, indoctrination and facts. Right? So we need to understand how to distinguish between the two. And the best way you do that is when you have a groundation. This is what I'm calling it. When you have a foundation, meaning that you are grounded in the Torah. And that's because you made up your mind to do everything that the Torah says before you find out what it means. You do it according to your best understanding of what the words mean until God sees that you are faithful in doing it that way to your understanding, and then he shows you a little bit more. That's why for years we were not cutting on our lights on the Shabbat, thinking that electricity was fire. And after doing it for over 20 years, my teacher for over 40 years, then he came, or more, 50 years, then we finally come to where God led us to the point where we looked up what fire is, and it must have a flame. And now we turn on lights on the Shabbat because God gave us a better understanding. But first, he's going to test us. And what we were talking about today, what my teachers were talking about today, is that God will test you and refine you in the fire, right? I think Chief Shama brought that today. And how he's going to test you is, are you going to do these words according to the way you read them, to the best of your understanding at the time you read them, without anybody having to prove them to you, because of one simple act of faithfulness, that you believe God and you believe that these are the words of God. That alone will get you over. You could be doing it wrong, but God sees that you're doing it exactly what the way the words say in English, even though it's not the depths of the meaning in Hebrew. And he's going to see and test you for how long you're going to hold on to that without folding, without breaking. How long of a track record you're going to lay down for yourself, because that counts. We see how it counted with David. His track record got him off the hook. Whereas somebody else commit those sins, you die for it. Right? And so these are all lessons that we need to take into consideration and learn from. And before we get to understanding all of these extra, supporting evidences that back up the law, let's just do it according to the way it's written, and leave that to men have devoted themselves and dedicated themselves to the responsibility of seeking out the information to break down what these words mean in Hebrew and then bring it to us using the book to decode what the word means and not an outside source, and then using outside sources to support what the book teaches us that these words mean. Okay, I hope all of that made sense. Let's continue. Verse 9, start again. Yes, please.
These shall ye eat of all that are in the waters, Whatsoever hath fins and scales in the waters, in the seas and in the rivers, them shall ye eat. And all that
Okay. So these ye shall eat of all that are in the waters, whatsoever have fins and scales in the waters, in the seas and in the rivers, them shall ye eat. In the waters, in the seas, and in the rivers, God was specific. We talking about salt water, we talking about sweet water. Sweet water is just fresh water. Don't necessarily taste sweet, just ain't salty. Them shall ye eat. Remember, it doesn't say these are clean to you. It says these shall you eat, because the context of the chapter is teaching us about what is clean to eat. And I want us to why I'm making these points, because I want us to read the book like that every time we read a chapter. Don't say to yourself, this is telling me that the animal's clean. It might mean that, but tell yourself what the verse just said. This is the book telling me that it is clean to eat, because the chapter is about what we can eat. Why is that important? Because we like to add all these other stipulations, and I need evidence to prove to me. We just stick to what it says and do what it says, and we'll be good. So, Tamshi, all that move that have not fins and scales in the seas,
and
verse
all
10.
that have not fins and scales in the seas and in the rivers, of all that move in the waters, and of any living thing which is in the waters, they shall be an abomination unto you. They shall be even an abomination. They shall be even an abomination unto you. Ye shall not eat of their flesh, but ye shall have their carcasses in abomination.
Good.
Whatsoever hath no fins nor scales in the waters, that shall be an abomination unto you.
Okay, hold it right there. So notice that it says in the seas and the rivers that have not, and the waters that have not fins and scales, and of any living thing. And of any living thing. Let's get that translation in Hebrew. Because it's beyond what is considered, let's just look at that in the Hebrew. Okay. Mine. U'Banichalim mikol sheretz hamayim. Of all nechalim. Of all, of all that swarm, or that the swarming things, or the swimming things that swarm in the waters. Umikol nefesh hachaya, and all the living creatures. So when it says all that move in the water, of all of the swimming things that swarm in the waters, and of all of the nefesh hachaya, all of the souls living. It said nefesh. Solomon said, who's to say that the soul of the beast goeth downward and the soul of man go upward? Right? Especially since we were made from the same thing, the earth. How about the creatures in the waters? Did we know that they had a nefesh, or they were referred to as a nefesh? And I want to make a distinction, because when we read in Hebrew, nefesh doesn't only mean a soul, it means a person when concerning the law. So in this, we're talking about a chaya, which is a living creature, and it's called a nefesh, which means it has a soul, which is why it's broken down as soul and not just a person, right? Because another thing that we need to note is that the Hebrew words do not have one meaning in this chapter and a separate meaning in this other chapter, and they mean different things whenever they're used in different contexts. No, they mean all of them, because they all have shared meaning elements. Now, the context might determine what it means in a specific context according to the specific meaning of how this word is used, but it doesn't mean that it still doesn't mean what it means in the other chapters. It's just that we need to stop thinking in English. So the translation of nefesh is used as a person sometimes, and a fish or a creeping thing in the water, a creature in the water is not a person. So we say it don't mean that. No, but it means what a nefesh, the definition of what the word nefesh embodies, is a living thing that has a soul, that has life. And that's what a nefesh is. So the word teaches us what, the book teaches us what words mean, not necessarily the dictionary attempting to translate the Hebrew word in its full capacity in a language that does not have words that describe the full capacity of that word. There are words in Spanish, in Chinese, in other languages on the earth, that if you try to translate it in English, you lose the feeling, you lose the understanding, you lose part of the depths of those words. The comprehension of how deep that message is gets lost in translation. It's the same way when we try to understand Hebrew in English. We can't understand Hebrew in its full capacity using English words to describe what these words mean. And that's a very difficult concept to try to understand, because especially for those of us that haven't learned other languages or haven't studied other languages or heard of this concept before. Because we've been taught that English, the whole world speaks English, so English is like the best language. You know what I mean? It ain't no other language better than it. We're the worst language. It's called the bastard tongue. You know why? Because it's made up of German, French, Latin, all these other languages. We got Hebrew words in it too. Did you know that? You know, Qasqeset comes from Kosher. I mean, but every language has, you know, words that come from Hebrew roots. You know, and that's because that's just more evidence to prove it was the first language. But I'm saying that to say this. We need to understand that because we grew up speaking English, you don't need to try to understand everything in an English context. In other words, if I can't make this Hebrew word fit my understanding with English words, then no, that don't go like that. That ain't it. I can't go for that. You're being closed-minded, and English is holding you back. So we need to understand that there are depths to these Hebrew words that you cannot fully translate in English. And that's why I said start thinking in Hebrew to understand that nefesh, even though it means soul, even though it means person, is also used to describe something that is living in the waters, which might help us understand that that living thing is like having a soul, right? And it might understand that that's how God classifies all living things. Why is this important? Because then you're able to understand that we're all connected, that all of creation is connected. If you don't think we're all connected, how come when we sin, drought happens? The heavens are closed and there's no rain. How come when we sin, the ground stops producing fruit? How come when we sin, all the species that live off of rain and what grows from the ground end up dying? Huh? If we're not all connected, how come trees die when we sin? How come there's earthquakes, hurricanes, storms because of our sins, or drought because of our sins? How come the cycle of the moon is all thrown out of course and the new moon is no longer an exact 28-day cycle, as I'm sure it was in the beginning? And if you notice in those 2 last weeks in the teachings that we went over, you know, the new moons and the feast days, I never got to the bottom that in the beginning it was a 28-day cycle of the moon and now it's not. I told why that happened, because of our sins. At what point that changed? Because Noah's observing 30-day months before the flood. At the point of the flood. You know why we ain't gonna never figure out certain things? Because of what I said. God takes away from you because of our sins. You ain't never getting it back. and you can try to dig, dip, and get to the bottom of it, and you ain't gonna get to the bottom of it. You're only gonna get so far in knowledge. You're not gonna be able to go above that, because God took it away from us, and He don't want us to understand it. When He took away something from you, you don't try to go get it back so you could do it again. No, you accept of your punishment. We humble ourselves and we seek out this knowledge so that we can teach people to adhere to these words exactly the way they are written, to the best of our knowledge, to the best of our understanding, according to what the word mean, without adding to or taking away from them. And that's the point of me bringing all of this information. That's the point of my brothers, my teachers that bring this information. The teachers, the sons of Chief Elazar, who bring this information, is so that we can do according to what it says, and not adding anything and not taking away, but keeping them for exactly as what they say. You want to do your own research? Fine. You better match it up with the book, or else it's ashpa. That's Hebrew for garbage. All right. So, again, going back to my notes, we need to talk about which living creatures in the waters have fins and scales that we can eat. We know them as fish. The word is not used in Leviticus chapter 11. Doesn't mention the word fish. Doesn't mention dog. Right? So, something that's important to note, there are different kinds of scales. And scientifically categorized types of scales. That's important to note, because the book tells us what God is referring to when He says scales. Scientists refer to other things as scales that God is not talking about in the law. And I'll give you an example. There are ganoid, is that the right name? Ganoid scales. And there are, what are they called? Percoloid. What are they called? Types of scales. There are ganoid scales. Scales. I didn't put that part in my notes because we just want to talk about that for a second. I will include it because people need to know. Okay. Sea creature. We have ganoid scales. We have ctenoid scales. We have cycloid scales. And then we have placoid scales. Right? And another one is cosmoid scales. Okay? So the scales that are referred to in the Torah are ctenoid scales and cycloid scales. Well, how do we figure that out? Well, placoid scales, you can't see them until you get to a microscopic level, right? And also, they're made of something totally different, right? And these are the type of scales, placoid scales are found on sharks. Now, when you look at a shark's skin, you say, man, he's smooth. He ain't got no scales. But if you rub your hand against the body of a shark going from his tail towards his head, you could get cut because the scales are small, pointy, tooth-like. And they have a pulp cavity inside of it, right? And they're laid down, but they're smooth so that the shark could swim faster, right? They're found on sharks, stingrays, skates. So when you rub your hand the wrong way, it feels rough, like sandpaper. Certain sharks, if you rub too fast, you could cut your hand because of the placoid scales. The ganoid scales are thick, hard, diamond-shaped plates that fit closely together, and they hardly overlap. So it's more like this, and like this rather, right? And those are found on smooth skin fishes, right? Like sturgeons, right? And the cosmoid scales are complex layered with a dentin-like outer layer called cosmine. So it has like this thin coating over it. And the dentin is, call it dentin because it's like dental. It's shaped, it's made from bone, like our teeth. Right? And so these are mostly found on fossil fish that have been extinct, and then on like lungfish and coelacanth, right? These are smooth-skinned fish, so you can't see these scales. Ctenoid scales and ganoid scales you can see. Some are larger than others, but they're round over. The ctenoid scales are round, overlapping cycloid scales, but they have a tiny comb-like teeth on the edge, on the back edge facing towards the fish's tail. And the cycloid scales are round or oval, like the shingles on a roof, right? Them old school houses with the round shingles, and they overlap smoothly and feature growth rings used to tell the fish's age, right? So they are also like what they call spiny rayed or bony, but it's of a softer material. It's not dentin, right? Which is what the other three scales are made out of. And so because these two have a different structure and you can see them, this is what tells us that this is what the Torah is talking about. God not going to tell them to go and only eat fish that have fins and scales, but you're going to need a microscope to be able to figure this out. No, that's not the way God get down. So you would be able to see them with the naked eye. And that's how you're going to know that you're able to eat this fish. If you can't see it with the naked eye, it's not a scale according to, it's not a Qasqeset, rather say. Because again, stop thinking in English, because a scale in English would be all of these categories we just read. But it's not a Qasqeset, because that's the word for scales in Hebrew in Leviticus chapter 11. So a Qasqeset is something that you can see. And to prove that it's different, these are made out of different materials as the other three. There's proof in all over the place. Even science will reveal what the book is teaching us, right? Unless they're just stubborn and stout-hearted and go. But when they're able to prove something with facts, 9.9 times out of 10, it matches up with the book. And the other times, it's not something that you're supposed to know. So leave it alone. It's not going to help. So it's not important. So now going to this list that I have compiled of fish that have fins and scales, because this is also important, because we need to know what fish we can eat. And then there are other factors involved, because clean does not automatically mean you may eat this particular piece of meat, right? And what's the difference? The Torah provides a list of, to make a difference between the clean and the unclean, right? So just because we find out something's clean doesn't mean you can eat it, because there are other factors involved in determining if something is clean. It would be the other prohibitions in the law that state if you could actually eat something that is clean. So the question of whether an animal is clean or unclean, whether it's tahor or tamei, according to Torah, is not the defining factor of whether it is permissible to eat by Torah. If it is clean, tahor, is there any Torah command that nevertheless prohibits eating its flesh? What was the blood drained properly, or has it been fully removed from its flesh? The blood. Is this particular part of the animal forbidden to eat? Is it Kheleb, which is the fat that is mentioned that we cannot eat, that is supposed to be only for the altar? Or is it organs? Because God did not permit us to eat the organs. Is the condition of this animal fit for consumption? And we're going to dive a little bit deeper into Kheleb and fat in a little bit after we get to a certain point in this chapter. Did it die of itself? Was it diseased, or did it have an organic defect? Because all of these are conditions according to the law that determine whether it's clean for us to eat or not. Not just because it's a clean beast or a clean fish, you could eat it. Right? So, okay. Kosher systems and restrictions. Is the food kosher? Because we just read the restrictions according to Torah, right? But in kosher restrictions, they only ask one question. Is the food kosher according to the complete body of Jewish dietary halakha? That's what they go by. That's it. Now, these are described by various rabbis, the halakha laws of what is kosher, and who may or may not adhere to the same strict codes, meaning one rabbi goes strictly by certain codes, and those codes could be whether the species whether the animal was killed by shechita, which is supposed to be the prescribed Jewish order of slaughter, and that is according to Torah. Was it sliced at the main arteries in the neck and drained, right? Is the inspection of the animal determined organic defects, if any? Does it have any? Was the blood removed? Removal of the prohibited Kheleb, which is the fat, removal of the gid hanashe, which is the sciatic nerve, because in Leviticus chapter, it talks about removing hard by the backbone of the tail of the sheep as an offering, because there's fat around that sciatic nerve. It's a different kind of fat, but it is mentioned that it was removed, right? So the priest would not have eaten that part. Separation of meat and dairy, that's kosher. That's not found in the Torah, right? Abraham served the angels flesh and milk and butter, right? So they ate it together. There's no separation of flesh and dairy according to what is acceptable to God. That's kosher only. Kosher preparation equipment. Usually that's in concerning the separation of dairy and flesh. They don't even use the same sinks. Again, that's not by Torah. That's only kosher. Kosher ingredients and additives. It may also include ingredients containing what the Jewish people refer to as betul, which is a Yiddish term that means equivalent to a drop in the ocean. And they say it means negligible. That's what it means, negligible. And they say it's equivalent to a drop in the ocean. So if it has 7 parts per million of blood in the milk, they will say that is betul, and they could drink it and make cheese out of it because they got the cheese, the milk from America, where they allow 7 parts per million of blood or less in the milk. UK allows 7 parts per million of blood in the milk that they sell in the UK. European countries in the EU do not. Okay, we need to keep constantly checking on these standards, because at some point one of them might change and say, hey, we allow certain parts of per million. It just basically means they allow 7 in the United States. They allow 7 drops to every 1 million drops of milk. 7 of those drops could be blood. And how does the blood get in the milk? Because the udders of the cows are milked by machine. And when you're getting the cow pregnant 3-4 times a year, and the cow's only supposed to get pregnant every 3 to 4 years, then he's getting milk. So she is getting milk so often, not by hand, by a machine that's going jerking hard on her udders. And the next thing you know, the udders get infected, and the udders start to drip pus into the milk, and pus has blood in it. So that is an infection, which also not healthy for you to eat, but according to Torah, makes it unclean because it has blood in it. And in this country, they allow 7 parts per million. The countries that don't allow it, their dairy industry or the meat industry is held up to more strict standards of how the cattle is treated, how they are milked, how often they get pregnant, right? So all of this has to do with how much blood is going to end up in the end product, right? And most countries in the EU, and including Australia and New Zealand, Finland, allow 0 parts per million of blood in the milk. And that's the way it should be if it's going to be fit to eat by Torah, because God said, no manner of blood shall you eat. You shall eat no manner of blood, right? So back to betul, kosher allows betul, which is the Yiddish term that means negligible, equivalent to a drop in the ocean, which is still considered kosher concerning fat and blood. So if it has a little bit of fat in it, but it's considered a drop in the ocean to however much of the rest of the ingredients are, and there's only a little bit of fat in it, they will eat it. They will stamp it kosher, and you could eat it. Don't forget that this kosher stamp is a business. Rabbis get paid to stamp certain things kosher. My teacher brought some information to us back in the 90s where there was something called the Kosher Gate cover-up, where a Jewish guy put on a hidden camera and went inside a production plant where they produce milk for the masses to be sent to grocery stores. And he found all of this out, and he put it in the kosher, called it the Kosher Gate cover-up, and he shared it with the Jewish community. And eventually they end up banning it and taking it off of the internet. Why? Because anything that threatens the dairy industry, which is one of the biggest money producers for the United States economy, they ain't gonna let you talk bad about that and let the whole world see it and then be like, nah, I ain't buying that no more. And that's what people spend most money on. You know, tell people you don't drink milk and they're like, what? So then what do you do? What do you drink? Like, I have to have a substitute or something. But in my house, we drink coconut milk, you know, straight up from pure coconut milk, nothing else in it, not the coconut milk brands with all the other guar gum and stuff in it or other ingredients, just pure coconut milk. Usually get it in a can or a carton. Or my wife makes our own milk. Put cashews and water in the blender. You know, you can add a little salt and agave, honey, whatever you want. Or any kind of nut. She's done it with pistachios, pecans, right? Almonds, you know, take your pick, you know, if you're starving for milk like that. But don't buy milk from the United States. You know, you ever wonder how they're able to get 2% fat milk and regular fat milk? What do you think? There's a 2% cow walking around? He got 2% body fat on him? That's not how it works. By the way, the word for milk in Hebrew is Kheleb, and the word for fat is Kheleb. The word for fat is also shuman. So we need to understand that Kheleb contains fat. That's not the fat from the animal, right? That's not animal fat from the Kheleb of the animal that we are supposed to burn on the altar and remove from the meat before we eat it. That's Kheleb. Khalab is milk. It comes from the same root word. It also has fat in it. It's not the same fat until in this country they add fat to the milk, right? In the homogenization process, or they add what is called rennet. Rennet is not fat. Rennet is the undigested mother's milk that attaches to the walls. This is how awesome God is in his creation, that when an animal, a mammal, drinks its mother's milk, all of the milk doesn't get digested because we're not able to process all of the nutrients from our mother's milk all at once. So instead of peeing or pooping the rest of it out, God designed breast milk and mother's milk of mammals to attach. The undigested portion attaches to the inside of the colon of the animal that is in development stage, and the nutrients are released periodically as the animal needs it in order to grow. Ain't that crazy? That is amazing, rather say. And that's how God designed you know, the breast milk, which is some of the most nutritious food that you could ever have on earth. And I ain't going with the vegans talking about, you know, cow milk is for cows, and we're only supposed to drink mother's milk from humans, and sheep's milk is just for sheeps. No, for lambs, no, it don't go like that, because our fathers drank milk of cattle, sheep, goat, cows, and we made butter and cheese from it. And they were healthy because back then they weren't adding all this garbage to it, right? And they treated their animals like livestock, right? And not like a cash machine, right? So they treated it as something that was living and took care of it. They gave it what it was supposed to eat and not try to pump it up with steroids and give it shots and put all this steroids in their feed that they're not even supposed to be eating, like corn and soy, because cows supposed to eat grass. right? And then they get so buff before it finished developing, and it's like a teenage cow with the size of a bodybuilding adult cow, and now the muscles are so big that it's frail bones that are still in development stage can't handle the weight of all this muscle that it packed on, and so now the cow's feet break from under him while he's standing up, and that's why they get sick. And 90-something% of the cows that are brought into the slaughterhouse to be chopped up for meat, and 90-some% of the cows that are milk cows that are used for milk and dairy, they're sick. Half of them are dying and have tumors by the time they're being slaughtered for meat, because after they're done with the dairy cows, they chop those up for meat too. So we need to understand how things work in this country, why you shouldn't be eating it, why it's not permissible according to Torah. We're not supposed to eat blood. We're not supposed to eat fat. Oh, but back to the rennet. Just because we know that rennet is not fat and it's the undigested mother's milk that attached to the inside of the lining of the intestines of the animal, when something says it has rennet in it, like cheese, we still can't eat it, because one of the brothers, my brother Zakaryah, brought some information to show that because it's such an intricate process to be able to scrape the rennet off of the inside of the intestines of the animal, and they try to boil it and to get it out of there. And in boiling it, we got to understand that some of these organs are actually Kheleb, which is fat. So that would go into the rennet. But they got to a point where they're saying we can't get all of it out anyway. So they just grind up the entire intestines until a mush and then boil that. And then that's what they call rennet. So you can't have none with rennet in it, even though the true definition of rennet is the undigested mother's milk in the lining of the intestines of the animal. So you got to understand how things are done and produced for the masses in this country, and that they don't care about you, right? They don't care about the laws of God. They don't care about us. So why we trust them so much, right? So let's go back down here now in these goats. I mean, in this, these notes, in these notes. And let's go back down, since we'll get back to the Kheleb a little bit later. But before that, right after this, as a matter of fact, we go into the Kheleb. Let's go into the list of clean fish that we can eat that have fins and scales. Now that we understand the difference of scales, the following list categorizes common, widely available fish that have fins and scales according to what a Qasqeset means in the law. However, it is important to note that what the Torah classifies as scales, the Qasqeset, modern day science has a broader definition of what scales is, and it includes other things beyond Qasqeset. So the following list features fish that exclusively have cycloid and ctenoid scales and strictly meet these biblical or Torah criteria. So fish with cycloid scales are salmon, including Atlantic, coho, sockeye, king salmon. I will warn you that the term Atlantic is synonymous with farmed fish, because all fish in the Atlantic fish industry on the docks of the Atlantic Ocean throughout the eastern seaboard of the United States and the eastern coast of Central and South America get or supply the seafood or the fish industry with farm-raised fish. So if you see Atlantic, it's more than likely not wild caught. Why is that important? Because not necessarily that it would be against the law to eat, but it's less healthy for you because they're feeding that fish soy and corn in the feed, and the fish are not eating what they're supposed to eat, like plankton and smaller creatures in the ocean, tiny little fish and creatures in the ocean that they would normally eat. So that is going to have a lesser nutrient content, and also that fish is going to develop other sicknesses that are not present in fish that live in a wild habitat, because Fish are not supposed to eat corn and soy. They're not supposed to eat plants that grow on the earth. They're supposed to eat whatever is in the ocean, right? Coho, sockeye, and king salmon are not always wild caught, but more likely. Alaskan salmon is also all wild caught because there are no farms in the Alaskan fishing industry. Something you need to check out and look up for yourself. Don't take my word for it, but make sure it says wild caught, troll caught, or pole and line caught. And why is wild caught okay when we're concerning salmon and certain fish? And I will let you know that depending on where the fish swims and what level in the ocean, and we're going to also go over this concerning a fish called orange roughy that I recently did some research on. But salmon swims near the top and in the middle of the ocean, not all the way down at the ocean floor. And same thing with tuna, which we're going to dive a little bit more into tuna because there is a discrepancy of whether or not tuna is clean. And so we're going to debunk that discrepancy today. But also trout, carp, herring, sardines. Yes, sardines do have scales. Anchovies do have scales. They are small game fish that have scales. And also cycloid scales. Right, whitefish and cod, haddock, pike, pickerel. Now, these are the type of scales that you will find that qualify as Qasqeset because they are able to be seen with the naked eye. You don't need a microscope to see them. And common sense, even though it's not so common nowadays, will tell us that if it's a scale that you can see with the naked eye, that's the scales that God is talking about because you shouldn't have to get out a microscope to determine if the fish is unclean or clean. Right. So fish with tuna, bluefin, yellowfin, albacore, skipjack, trout, rainbow trout, brook, brown trout. And I did my research. So again, don't take my word for it. Look it up for yourself. Make sure you find pictures or go buy some and look at it for yourself if you could get the fish whole. Go buy some sardines. Go buy some anchovies, not sliced up and chopped up, but whole. And look at it for yourself. Rub your finger across it where you can feel the scales, and you will see it with the naked eye, right? Bass that have satinoid scales, largemouth bass, smallmouth bass, striped bass, perch, including yellow perch, crappie, blue perch, bluegill, sunfish family, snappers such as red snapper, groupers, flounder, and sole. They're the flatfish group. Orange roughy. Now, halibut. Well, what I want to tell you about some of these fish is that if they swim at the bottom part of the ocean, because wild caught means they caught it with a net. So why is that okay concerning tuna and salmon and other fish like bass, snapper, cod, fish that swim in the middle to the upper layers or levels of the ocean water, right? Because if it died, some fish will sink depending on what kind of digestive system it has. If it has a gaseous digestive system, meaning it has air in there, then it will float, right? And they don't use the net across the top of the water, right? And so it has to go down a little bit where the fish are swimming to be able to catch them. So wild fish would have to catch a live fish, right? Why it's not good if you're getting wild caught fish of a certain variety of fish or a type of fish that swims along the ocean floor, because the fish could have died and it would have sunk, and fish that do not have a gaseous digestive system means that it's filled up with water or fluid. They sink when they die. Right. And that's why there are creatures to clean the ocean floor like lobster and crab, which is the roaches of the sea, and the shrimps that eat the things that die that fall and sink to the bottom, just like roaches do. Right. And so this is what also a characteristic to show you God gave us things that eat other fish that we could eat or plant life. Right. As far as the fish are concerned. Okay, and the ones that we can't eat are usually carnivorous, or they have another purpose to clean the ocean, right? But again, I'm just making points. There's reasons why God said that these things that we can and can't eat, but I want to stick to what the Torah's reasoning is for us to be able to eat it, which is it must have fins and scales. Any other reason outside of that is just extracurricular activities. You can say, oh wow, that's kind of cool, we figured that out, but that's not what makes it clean. What makes it clean is if it has fins and scales. That's it. Now, I won't eat wild-caught halibut because it swims along the ocean floor. They're born with both eyes on both sides of the head, but they swim on one side, and throughout their lifetime, the other eye makes its way to the top of the fish that is on facing the top of the ocean, and the side that's on the floor has no more eye. So halibut have two eyes on the same side of their head, just like a few other varieties of fish that swim along the ocean floor and eat whatever's down there. Not to say that, oh, that's disgusting, that's why they should be unclean. No, but because when they die, they'll stay right there on the bottom. So if someone is going to catch halibut with a net, then what they're going to do is scrape up the living and the dead. So I found out that orange roughy is another kind of white fish. The flesh is white, that also swims near the bottom of the ocean, but not along the ocean floor. It swims in mountainous regions of the ocean floor. So it swims above those mountains where there's a current of going through, because we've all read in the book where there are rivers under the ocean, right? And you have freshwater and saltwater currents under the ocean. We have freshwater currents under the salt water at certain depths in the ocean where you go and it's no longer salt, it's fresh water, because the rivers all lead to the ocean, and that water shoots through the ocean in jet streams is what it's called. And it doesn't mix with the salt water. And you have certain fish that swim in those waters from the oceans. Salmon swim in both. And they go to the oceans and go upstream and spawn, which means they have their young, they lay their eggs upstream, and they go back down into the ocean. And a lot of salmon is caught in that particular part where they're swimming down back into the ocean before they go up, because they don't want to catch the salmon that are about to give birth, because they don't want to stop the production of salmon. So they catch them as they're coming back down into the ocean, which means they're swimming and they're alive. Another reason why you should be getting wild caught salmon, right? Or pole and line caught, because it had to bite in order to get to die, right? How did the fish die? He opened his mouth. That's a metaphor. Teach you to keep your mouth shut, and it just might save your life sometimes, right? And other times it's teaching us that the fish has to bite in order to die. So he was alive. Now, orange roughy is the type of fish that he swims close to the ocean floor, but where there is rigid ranges and there's a current down there. So if it would have died, the current would sweep it to the bottom of the tops of these peaks of the mountainous regions underneath the ocean floor. So if someone was catching orange roughy with a net, they wouldn't be able to scrape the bottom because the bottom is jagged, and that net would get caught. So fishermen that catch orange roughy with a net or wild caught practices, they go above before where the ocean floor is, and they have radar and all that to be able to determine how deep it is, how far they need to cast that net. They have weights on the net. It gets lowered down by a machine or a crank, and that's how they're able to catch or fish for certain types of fish at certain depths, right? If that makes sense. So think about that. When just because the fish have fins and scales and it is clean, just like the beast, there are conditions that we need to understand to determine if we are still able to eat it. And if there's a fish that could have been caught dead already, then you can't eat it, because we can't eat nothing that died of itself. Concerning the orange roughy and fish that swim at a lower depth, when they are caught with a net, when they're brought up, by the time they get to the top, they died. But that doesn't mean it died of itself. It died when it got caught. It wouldn't have died unless it got caught, right? So things to think about, right? Just like a fish that you catch with a hook. He don't die as soon as the hook go in his mouth. He died when you take him out the water. Reason why the orange roughly die before they get to the top, because they swim at a different depths where it's so deep that there's a different pressure level. So as he goes through at a certain speed and those nets are being brought up to the top, the pressure kills the fish. Again, the catch is what killed him. So he didn't die of itself. We have to know these things, and this takes research for you to be able to determine what fish you could eat. Now, this is where we're going to go to two different things to understand, because there's a lot of information out there or misinformation out there that says that tuna are unclean or they don't have scales. And here's some information on that. Tuna do not have the same scale patterns across their entire bodies like other fish that have scales. All fish don't have the same patterns across their bodies as other fish, right? So their scale configurations vary significantly by species, by the kind or type of tuna. So while all tunas are specialized for high-speed swimming, they possess a fascinating variation in scale geometry, featuring drastically different sizes of scales and distributions depending on the body region and the specific type. So what part of their body and the type of tuna it is determines how big the scales are and how they are configured on this tuna's body, right? A single tuna possesses multiple types of scales that vary in size, thickness, and visibility. The corselet is the part around the fish's neck near the gills. All tuna have a distinct band of dense overlapping scales right behind the gills openings and surrounding the pectoral fins called the corselet. Scientific CT scans show that corselet scales are heavily modified, hollow, flat-filled structures made of rigid cellular bone in the fairing region of the shoulder. These scales stack up to 5 layers deep, forming an almost indigestible rigid armor shell to protect their core. The lateral line is a narrow strip of the slightly larger specialized porous scales runs horizontally down the flank of the fish. These help protect the fish's sensitive motion detecting sensory organs. The main body, these are sometimes microscopic or just smaller. Right? So even if these are scales that are microscopic, they already have the visible corselet scales and the visible lateral line scales. Okay? So over the vast majority of the torso, the belly, and the tail, the scales are smaller, are drastically smaller in size. They are so incredibly small and smooth that to a casual observer, the tuna appears completely scaleless. This layout reduces hydrodynamic drag, allowing the fish to cruise efficiently at high speeds underwater. So true tunas, bluefin, big eye, yellowfin, albacore, they have a classic design. Their body is covered entirely in scales, but only the corselet region and the lateral line feature prominently visible scales. Skipjack tuna and the little tuni, these species take the drag reduction strategy even further. They are considered partially naked. They possess thick, visible patches of scales at the corselet along the lateral line, but the rest of their main body are completely lacking scales, right? And then the primitive exception is the butterfly kingfish. Though rare, this primitive relative in the tuna family deviates completely from standard tuna anatomy. Its body remains fully covered in large, traditionally visible cycloid scales throughout its life, making it look much more like the standard scaled fish that we are used to seeing. Right? Okay, another thing we got to keep in mind, the fish processing, of how the fish is processed after it's caught before it goes to the store. Because of the wildly varying scale sizes of these fish, fishmongers use a specialized Japanese scaling technique called tsukibiki for large tuna varieties. Instead of scraping the fish, like you might have seen people do with a scale scraper, which falls against the bone-like corselet scales, a long knife is used to shave off the dense armor patch, entirely leaving the delicate skin underneath intact. So sometimes you will get a fish that is tuna that has been prepared for the market, and you won't see the scales because they use the sukibiki technique of using a sharp knife to skin off that layer of scales, and it only leaves the skin of the fish intact, right? So you'll see the color of it, you'll see the shine, but you won't see the scales. Something else to keep in mind. Now, personally, I have a friend who every year in Baja California, which is the body of water that's between the Pacific Ocean and a region of land that they call Baja California. It's in Mexico. It's a peninsula, and on either side of the Pacific Ocean waters or inside of the peninsula waters, which is also part of the Pacific Ocean, there is a high tuna population at certain times of the year. And every year he goes fishing and he catches tuna. Sometimes they're 50 pounds, 70 pounds tuna, and he's holding them up, and every year he brings them home. When I used to live up north, he lives up north and California, Central Coast, California, and I've seen the fish. I've seen the scales. He's also given me pieces of this fish after it got cut up, right? So something else to keep in mind, right? In this documents that I've drafted up with these notes, I've been not only the animals, but some of the fish that have scales, including tuna. Okay, so something that you can see with your own eyes is always better. But other than that, you can rely on these pictures right here, where it's bluefin tuna, even towards the tail where the scales are small, you can still see them, right? And then around the corselet region, you can see where they're larger. Okay, so tuna do have scales, and they are clean to eat according to. Another thing I want to mention, we're going to get into the definition. Go to Leviticus chapter 3 before we continue Leviticus 11. The last verse in Leviticus chapter 3. So let's agree on something. The Torah does not contradict itself, right or wrong, right? Somebody put it in the chat. The Torah does not contradict itself. It doesn't say something in one chapter and then say something totally different in another chapter, right? It means that whatever the two statements that were made that sound like it could be contradictory, either we're coming up with a mistranslation in English, or we need to look at the context of what that particular chapter is about so that we can understand what this verse is referring to. So in Leviticus chapter 3, we're looking at the last verse, but if you read the entire chapter, you can see that Leviticus chapter 3 is talking about the offerings, and it's talking about specifically what part of the animal should be taken and removed to burn on the altar, and what part of the animal should be eaten, of the burnt sacrifice, of the peace offering sacrifice, taking the two kidneys and the fat that is on them, the flanks and the caul above the liver with the kidneys, it shall he take away. These are all different names in Hebrew. But concerning the fat that goes on the altar is called Kheleb, Chet Lamed Beit. That's the fat that is to be burnt on the altar that we're supposed to be taken off from around the entrails or the organs of these animals. That's where that fat is present. Okay? There is other fat. If you've ever eaten a cow, a lamb, a goat, a deer, there is something called the marbleized fat that is in between the tendons of the muscles themselves. Now, Leviticus 3, read the last verse for us, please.
It shall be a perpetual statute for your generations throughout all your dwellings, that ye eat neither fat nor blood.
That you eat neither fat nor blood. But for time constraints, I'm not going to go through the whole chapter of Leviticus chapter 3. But even though we know that King James is who put these into chapters, and before that, the Torah was broken down by paragraph, you can see that if you get a Torah scroll, concerning the offerings is all in one paragraph. And this particular chapter, Leviticus chapter 3, is all together within the Torah scroll to break down the laws concerning what to do with the fat of the offering, what to do with the rest of the meat of the offering, what to do with the entrails of the animal for that offering. The only animal that we were commanded to keep whole was the Passover lamb. That's it. And it burned completely whole, with its head, with its inwards intact. And we were supposed to cut the meat off of it and eat it like that, because Exodus chapter 12, I believe verse 46 says, you shall not break a bone thereof. So you couldn't cut off a leg talking about, I'm taking this front leg for me. No, you had to slice off the meat of the whole entire animal, skewered and burned, or cooked, rather say, with all the entrails inside of it. So you had to not dissect it as they would have for an offering, but you would have had to cut the animal meat off from the outside of the carcass and eat it just like that. Now, in doing that, the fat is not going to all melt on that skewer while it's being and drip out, because the animal's whole. It has nowhere to drip out but go inside the animal. So this tells us that when we read Leviticus chapter 3 and it talks about the Kheleb, which is the fat that should not be eaten, that is for the Lord, that is to be burnt on the altar, and it specifically tells us where this fat is located, the two kidneys, the caul above the liver, the flanks, and it tells us where the fat is located and how to remove it. If you read this chapter, it's very intricate. We can determine that that's not talking about the fat that's in between the muscles. Now, did our fathers tear apart every muscle of flesh before they bit into it? I don't know, but I know just because I've eaten lamb, obviously draining the blood out and cutting the fat off and then boiling it to get any excess fat off of, and then still having to tear the meat apart to get the little layers of thin layers like a sheet in between the fat, in between the muscle. And I did all of that. It takes a long time. And if every piece that feels like that is considered the fat, then our fathers were eating shredded meat. And they never cooked a steak or nothing like of that nature. Now, do we have that in the book to back up? No, that's a very intricate detail. Was everything that they ate like shredded meat? That's a very intricate detail. Something that we would think would be included in the Torah laws concerning the way we could eat meat, especially since God said, you shall eat no manner of fat. So because we know that the Torah doesn't contradict itself, because we know that this particular verse in talking about fat is related to all of these verses previous to it in Leviticus 3 that's talking about the fat of the animal in the sacrifice, we need something to back this up. So go to Leviticus chapter 7. I'm not going to just tell you what I think. I'm going to go to certain parts of the book to back up what we're deciphering or decoding from what these words are saying. Go to Leviticus chapter 7. Again, I'm not going to read through this whole chapter, but it's concerning the altar, the different types of offerings that are burnt on the altar, the burnt offering, what to do with it, the kidneys and the fat that is on them by the flanks, and the caul that is above the liver with the kidneys, it shall he take away, and the fat that covereth the inwards and the rump, and all of these things. And they have different specific words used for them in Hebrew. But the fat concerning the offerings, every time it says fat, the word is Kheleb. Right? Now, if you look up, not in the Torah, you ain't going to find it. You find Shemain in the Torah. You find Shaman. The word Shuman is not mentioned with those specific vowels, but in other, in the Hebrew dictionary, rather say, Shuman is referred to as fat that is in between the muscles of the meat, right? The little strips and layers that connect the muscle tissue together, right? And so that is not what we're reading about. We're not reading the distinction between Shuman or Kheleb in the Torah. So we have to stick to what the definition of Kheleb is. And since we don't have Shuman in the Torah, we're only going by what a Hebrew scholar or Hebrew dictionary defines as Shuman. The only other time we read about fat that is not referring to the fat of the offering, that is referred to as Shuman or Shemain or Shaman or Shimanim or Shimnamim in the rest of the Tanakh, is in verses like when he says, eat the fat of the earth. All right, like Deuteronomy 32, right, where he says, you know, the fat of calves. And it's not talking about the fat of the Kheleb, but it's talking about fat meat, a rich meat that is full, right? Or the richness of the earth, the richness of the produce of the land. And the word for that is not the word for fat. Kheleb in the Torah concerning offerings, it comes from shemain, which is also used as the fat of oils, right? Keep this in mind. So the same thing as olive oil is referred to as shemain in the Torah, right? The same thing as shuman is referred to as any other fat other than the kheleb, which is only referred to as the fat of the offering, not the fat of the entire animal, but the fat that God told us to remove, and specifically where it is located in Leviticus chapter 3, and also reference here in Leviticus chapter 7. Take a look and read through these chapters on your own. For the Hebrew scholars, check it out in Hebrew and let me know what you come up with. Go to chapter 20, verse 22, Leviticus 7. Tamshi.
And the Lord spake unto Moses, saying, speak unto the children of Israel, saying, ye shall eat no manner of fat of ox, or of sheep, or of goat. Specific
this time. Ye shall eat no manner of fat of ox, of sheep, or of goat. Tamshi.
And the fat of the beast that dieth of itself, and the fat of that which is torn with beasts, may be used in any other use, but ye shall in no wise eat of it.
Right. So the fat of the beast that dieth of itself, because you're not offering that for an offering, and the fat of that which is torn with beasts, may you be used in any other use, but you shall in no wise eat of it. And the word for the fat is kheleb. Okay? What we have here, we bring up the Hebrew. Oh, I got it right here. Daber b'nei Israel lemor kal kheleb shor wekeseb we'ez lo tokelu. Of ox or of sheep or of goat. Why? Because all of these are commanded to be offered as offerings. And God said the fat is his. It belongs to him. You must burn it on the altar. You should in no wise eat of it. Lo tokluhu. Right? The fat of that which died of itself and the fat of that which is torn of beasts may be used for any other service, in any other use, in any other work. It says here, melaka. But you shall in no wise eat of it. You can make soap out of it. You can use it to cure leather, but you can't eat it. But whosoever eateth the fat of the beast of which men present as an offering made by fire unto the Lord, whosoever eateth of the fat of the beast, verse 25, of which men offer an offering made by fire unto the Lord, even that soul that eateth it shall be cut off from his people. You cannot eat the fat, the kheleb, and it's specific in Leviticus 3 to tell us where the fat is located. And that fat is also encased and able to be peeled off from where the organs are. It's not the same type of fat that's in between the muscles of the meat that you find in little tiny little sheets where you got to dissect and shred that whole meat apart just to remove it. I've done it. It's a different fat. Now, we just read where it says you shall eat no manner of fat. And we just read where it was talking about the offerings and the same word used for fat in the offerings, kheleb, and tells you where that kheleb is located is the same word for fat when it says you shall eat no manner of fat. So the kheleb is a description of a specific type of fat that we read about where it's located in this animal. I'm not trying to change nothing. I'm not trying to add to it. I'm not trying to take away. I'm telling you what the book says in Hebrew. You can take it for what you want and say, nah, I'm going to stick to what I already know. You can say that if you want. I'm here to learn. And we don't even eat meat like that in my house like that. But I need to know what the Torah says to be able to teach it properly. And if I'm going to tell somebody you can't eat that, it's against the law, I got to be able to show you where it's at in the Torah. Read Leviticus 3 in Hebrew. Read Leviticus 7 in Hebrew. Understand the meaning of Kheleb. This is why we talked about this earlier. What the word means in Hebrew does not have the exact same meaning in English, and only that meaning in English. Fat is what it's called in English, but we can see fat used interchangeably, where it means the richness of the earth, or it can also mean the fat of the beast that's around, the fat itself that is around its organs. That's called Kheleb. No time did we ever read a word that referenced the fat that's in between the muscles that the priest is eating. No time did we read a reference in the Torah that tells the priest when he eats of the flesh, he must remove the fat from in between the muscle. It doesn't tell him what to do with that. There's no command concerning that, so that we can't add on and say that they were shredding up their meat and eating shreds and removing tiny little pieces of fat. Do you know what that intricate process is? If you've ever done it, you know. I've done it. And there might be some tiny little piece that you might have missed. I don't know. Maybe I missed a tiny little piece that I couldn't even see or feel. You think that's how our fathers was eating meat? Common sense, not so common anymore. So we're just going to stick to what the book says. And since there's nothing that tells us what the priest should do with the meat and how to remove the fat from the actual muscle of the flesh of the meat, we're going to say that's not Kheleb, because that's not what the Torah calls Kheleb. That's not what the Torah referred to as Kheleb. We can only stick to what the Torah calls Kheleb, and that's the fat that spoke about in Leviticus 3, Leviticus 7, and it tells you where it's located. If somebody got something else that they want to show me and find in the Torah that they found in the Torah in Hebrew, please help me and bring it so that we can review this together. But I'm only telling you what I found according to what it says in Hebrew. And I'm going to keep it according to what it says. And I accept that whatever God showed me in the Hebrew, according to the definitions of the word in Hebrew and how it's used in that context, I'm going to stick to what it says without adding my own understanding, without saying, nah, it got to mean something else because with my own reason after the because. I'm going to stick to what the books say. And whatever the book's reason is, I don't got another reason on top of it. That's what it is. So it specifically tells us we cannot eat the fat of the ox, the sheep, or the goat, or of any of the beasts that men offer an offering made by fire unto the Lord. And the soul that eat that, which is the Kheleb, shall be cut off. Now let's go down. Sin offering, trespass offering, sacrifice. Okay. All right. Now, with that in mind, there's certain things that science classifies as fat, right? Like the DHAs, omega-3s that you will find not only in flaxseed, but in fish skin, right? And the flesh of the fish. If you want to get technical, those little white lines that you see in a salmon, in the meat, when you cut it against if you cut it perpendicular to the fillet, them little white lines that you see in the flesh of the fish, technically, by scientific definition, that is fat. Is that the fat that God talking about in Torah that tells us we can't eat? There needs to be a command to tell me that. And if that's not the case, and that's not fat that God talking about, then why is the fat in the lamb's flesh or the cow steak in between the little layers in between the muscle? How is that a reference to fat? Because we can't go by what science classifies as fat and just apply it to Torah. We see where that wasn't true when we read about the different types of scales. So we got to go by what Qasqeset means in Hebrew and how it refers to visible scales, because God not going to tell us you got to take out a microscope to be able to determine if the fish is clean. Obviously, it's something you could see with your own eyes. And all the other 3 classifications of scales, according to science, you must use a microscope to be able to see them, or a highly magnified mechanism where a tool that you can magnify something if it's not a microscope, right? And so if we can see that about the scales, how science wasn't right according to Torah with that one, then why are we not understanding that with the Kheleb concerning the fat? Because the DHA and the omega-3s that's in salmon come from that little white little strip that's in the flesh, and so does the fat that's in its skin. But that doesn't make salmon's skin unclean, because God specifically told us you cannot eat the fat of ox, goat, or sheep. Why? Because there's a use for offerings, and he said the fat belongs to him. Now in Deuteronomy 14, it tells us about other animals that we could eat. Let's go there. That chew the cud and part the cloven hoof. So let's go to Deuteronomy 14. Verse 5 says, the hart, the gazelle, and the roebuck, and the wild goat, and the pygarg, and the antelope, and the mountain sheep, every beast that part of the hoof, and hath the hoof wholly cloven in 2. I'm reading you the translation from Hebrew. And cheweth the cud among the beasts that ye may eat. Now it don't tell us what to do, because these are not beasts that we offered that were eligible by the priestly laws in Leviticus to be offered on the altar. So we don't offer the hart. We don't offer gazelles as offering. We don't offer roebucks. We don't offer wild goats. We don't offer pygarg, the antelope. But we can still eat these beasts. Does that mean we can eat the Kheleb? No, because the Kheleb is still classified by the fat that surround those organs. And God told us where they're located in the other animals that we're able to eat, so we wouldn't eat that Kheleb. But does Kheleb classify as scientific English classifies what fat is? I'm sticking to what the Torah says. I'm not adding, I'm not taking away. I'm not bringing, well, that must mean is that because fat means this. In English, fat means this according to science. But what does Kheleb mean according to Torah definition? And if that's the case, we don't offer fish on the altar either. So the DHAs and the omega-3 fats that are found in fish, by the way, which have the same structure, here we go, have the same type of fat that you find in olive oil, same found in fish skin, that's found in fish, period. We don't offer those on the altar. So he mentioned specifically the fat that we're not supposed to eat. And that fat is not classified as Kheleb according to Torah definition. According to Torah definition, right? And I think it's important that we stick to the words as for what they mean in the book, as the book describes and tells us what it means, instead of classifying everything under a scientific definition of something that we learned in modern day studies of science from people that don't study Torah. You can't mix the two. We got to stick to what we find out these words mean in Hebrew, in Torah, and used in the context of the Torah laws themselves, and not take it out of the Torah law, compare it and bounce it off of what scientific English says it means, and then put it back into the Torah law, because now we're corrupting the law. We're not doing it exactly the way it's written. We're not reading it for what it says. We're adding what we think, what we've been taught. We have to be careful with that. So the fat in the fish skin, by what we read here, is not forbidden to eat. And if that's the case, you got to tear apart that fish and get some tweezers or something, and take off every little layer of that white line in between the flesh of that salmon. And if it's a white fish, you can't see that because they have it in it too. So you think God telling us that we could eat fish, but then make it difficult for us to eat fish because you can't see it to remove the fat? I mean, let's be logical, man. Common sense is not that common anymore, but come on. God is not a trickster, man. He's not going to make something difficult for you to get done. If he commanded it, it's able to be done. You could be holy. Abraham ate flesh the same day it was killed. Once the blood is drained properly and they didn't eat the Kheleb and the animal didn't have an organic defect, you could eat it the same day you kill it because Abraham did it. You just got to know what you're doing and make sure that there's no blood or Kheleb in the meat when you eat it, and that it didn't die of itself, and that it didn't have an organic defect. Where is that verse? Somebody put it in the chat. You should not eat anything that died of itself, I believe, or torn of beasts is what I believe it says in King James. Right? Normally I would have had that on deck, but all this information, I didn't bring up that verse. But since it is on the topic, where in the Torah does it say, if y'all can hear me in the chat, Chief Shama, I know you got that. Where does it say, you shall not eat anything that died of itself or is torn with beasts in English? So we can see what that says in Hebrew. Yeah. While you doing that, I'm waiting. I will Google it. Mm-hmm. Y'all there? The chat look kind of dead. Ain't nobody saying nothing. Y'all there? What is it? All right. Enemy torn of beast. Torn to the dog. Mention that the fat of animal torn of beast. 22. Is that Leviticus 22? Go to Leviticus 22, verse 8.
Leviticus 22, verse 8.
Mm-hmm. Exodus 22. Thank you.
Exodus 22?
Yeah. Last verse. Thank you, Chief Shama.
Got it.
And I said in the beginning of these teachings, we're going to hear some things that sound strange to us. But we were raised in America, in a place where it's strange. We were raised with teachings that are strange. We were raised, indoctrinated by the school system whose teachings are strange, especially in America, where they lie to us all the time. We were raised in a society that relies on what scientists have found based on theories instead of fact that are strange. Now we come and we read the Torah and we want to apply this same strange way of thinking to how we learned the Torah, basing what words mean on what we were taught by these strange teachers, by these strange teachings, by these strange doctrines. All I'm trying to do is break free from that and let the Torah teach me. That's all we should be trying to do. Find out what these words mean read the context in which they were read in, which they were mentioned, according to the meanings in the context, applying all the meanings of the word to the context, and let the context that that same word is used in other parts of the book teach us what the words mean. How it is used teaches us how it means, what it means according to God. Go ahead, Exodus 22, the last verse. Read that for us in English.
And ye shall be holy men unto me, neither shall ye eat any flesh that is torn of beasts in the field. Ye shall cast it to the dogs.
Okay, and what does that translate in Hebrew? Okay, here we go. Where anshe kwadosh tihiyun li, and holy men holy shall you be unto me. Ubasar basade, and the flesh of the field, Terefa, that is torn, lo tokelu. This ain't the one. Leviticus 22, that is torn of beasts. Any flesh that is torn, it says. Terefa means torn. I'm looking for Nebelah oo'Trefah. Go to this. Chapter 22. Leviticus 22. Leviticus 22. Okay. What verse is that? And go to verse 8. Read me verse 8.
That which dieth of itself, or is torn with beasts, he shall not eat to defile himself therewith. I am the Lord. They shall.
Thank you, scribe. Joshua, you're a little late there, pal. On time, nonetheless. Leviticus 22, verse 8. That which died of itself or is torn with beasts, he shall not eat to defile himself therewith. I am the Lord. Speaking of the priests. Nebelah oo'Trefah. Nebelah is a carcass. Terefa means torn. Just like kitobet kwa, katab or kitobet is a writing or inscription. Kwa is an engraving. But when you put the words kitobet kwa together, it means a tattoo. Nebelah is a carcass. Terefa is torn. When you put those two together, it does not mean a carcass that is torn. It translates to a carcass with an organic defect, meaning one of the organs of that animal was damaged, or he had a tumor, or he was sick and diseased. He had an organic defect. This is why we are forbidden to eat animals that died of themselves. More importantly, because of this particular instance that would prove that there's a reason why he died of himself, and because he had an organic defect. He had a disease, or one of his organs were damaged or diseased, right? So once that is not the case, and it's a clean beast, he didn't die of itself. So even if the animal was sick and you killed it and he had an organic defect, that would make the meat still unable to be eaten, or not permissible by Torah to be eaten. Right? So this is what we're looking. This is what we're looking for. We're looking for not to say, what does this mean in English? Or what is the definition of this in English? But what does the Torah teaches us that these words mean according to how it is used and the instructions that were given us by God with this word to describe the things that we're reading about. And if we stick to that, we won't add our own point of view. We won't add what I think. We won't add English definitions. We will only stick to what the words are translated as according to the way they are used in the book, starting with the Torah, All things in other parts of any other part of the book, we bounce it off the Torah if that word is used in the Torah, because these are the instructions of life. These are the instructions that teach us how we should live. That is the order of life that God established from the beginning. Noah knew these laws. That's how come he could declare us clean from unclean before the law was even given to Moses. And that was passed down from Adam. How could Enoch be a man that walked with God if he had no knowledge of what was clean from unclean, what was holy from profane? It's all in there. We're just not seeing it. Sometimes because we're not looking close enough, and other times because we refuse to see it. We argue with the words. We say, I already know what that words mean. Thank God I had the teacher that I had, Chief Elazar. And he taught me that just because you think you already know what that word means, don't mean you ain't got to look it up. And he taught me that when he told me to look up the word go, referring to Deuteronomy chapter 6, where it says, ye shall not go after other gods. Come to find out, we'll go to the dictionary, and the word go has 2 pages. 2 pages. And I know I'm beyond the time right now. I'm not even watching the clock. But the sun is down for y'all, or it's about to go down. But I'm going to sum it up in a few. But come to find out, the word go had 2 pages in Webster's dictionary, not the new ones, the old ones. And one of the definitions said to follow a certain course or procedure, which makes it so deep now, because you're not going after another god like you're chasing after it, or you going into the church or the temple or the mosque or whatever to serve this other god, but you're just following a course or a procedure that is acceptable or prescribed by the order of a specific religion. Yeah, because those are what the gods are. The courses that they follow are religion. We got to stick to what these words mean, learn what these words mean, apply what they mean. And I know I told Shama, yeah, I'm going to get through this chapter. There's a lot of information that comes with these verses, and we need to be able to get through it all. Sometimes, especially when these words are new to us and the definitions, and for us to be able to understand it. So, whatsoever have no fins or scales in the waters, that is a detestable thing. Is an abomination to you. Verse 13 is where we left off. And I will continue with a part 2 to the dietary laws. According to Torah, we will continue at verse 13, Leviticus chapter 11 next week. If you want to watch this video and rewind it to make sure I said what I said and don't add on to what I said to say, well, he said this and he said that, I'd rather you watch it again and quote what I said directly and go back to these verses that we're going over in the book and look it up in Hebrew, or have someone that understands Hebrew look it up for you, and then use multiple dictionaries to get to the bottom of what these words mean, and then go to other parts of the book where these words are used to be able to understand how they are used in the context that they are used in, so that we can get to the bottom of what God is trying to teach us without adding our own opinions or interpretations. With that, I hope that everybody is inspired to study, to humble ourselves, to be open to learning new things from the Torah, allow ourselves to be taught, to seek God in simplicity of heart, and to turn from our evil ways, remove pride far from us, and walk upright before the Most High our God, and returning to Him so that we can repair the breach. I bid you in the ancient tongue of our fathers, Shabbat Shalom Lechem.
Shabbat Shalom Lekah.
Anybody have any questions before I get out of here? I know people got questions and comments, because these are topics, new information that has not been brought before. If there are questions or comments, you got my number, call me. If you don't have my number, then you can email me with the questions and we'll go over it together. And also, I will have your email at that time, and I will be able to share this information with you with all of these notes. And I'm putting my email. Stop it. Putting my email. You on camera. You know that, right? I'm putting my email in the chat right now. Obviously, you replace the @ with the @ sign and put everything together. If you have any questions or you want to discuss this in depth, if you are well versed in Hebrew and you see things differently, you might know something that I don't know because I'm still learning too, then call me, let's discuss this, or email me, and then we can exchange phone numbers and we could go over this thing together. We could compare notes. We could go into the Hebrew in the Torah with the Tanakh, and I'm open to learning as well. So with that said, if anybody doesn't have any questions for the chat, we'll wrap it up right here. Shabbat Shalom.